ACL injuries in female athletes are very common. Apparently, a lot of females suffer a disproportionate number of non contact ACL injuries. And of course, we always hear people argue that injury prevention isn't a real thing. You can't prevent injuries. Um, and I couldn't help but think about this a little bit. And I thought to myself, I appreciate the idea that we can only reduce injuries and we can't prevent injuries. Um, you ever see ballet? Yeah, that's a lot of jumping. And ballet dancers are very, how do I want to put this, strict with their form whenever they land. Why? Because there's an aesthetic part to ballet. See, ballet isn't just it isn't a sport. It's a performance, and so there's an element to this where when they land, they have to land in a certain way because some wobbly landing would not look good for ballet because it's an art. You'll notice that ballet dancers also have amazing flexibility and mobility. I mean, not only can they get into full splits, but they can stand there and lift their leg all the way up as if they were doing a standing full split. And so they have this incredible control combined with that flexibility and mobility. And despite all the jumping and changes of direction that occur in a ballet performance, ballet dancers do not have a high rate of ACL injury. So if you think about this logically, you have this performance, ballet, all this jumping and landing, and changing directions over and over and over and over again, with a very low rate of ACL injuries. And yet we see very high rates of ACL injuries, non-contact ACL injuries in female athletes that are competing in sports like soccer and volleyball and basketball, most of it occurring from landing. And so if we were sort of to reverse engineer this, I think that there's some element of how ballet dancers train that we could take and apply to our female athletes. And primarily, I think a lot of that would come down to flexibility, mobility, motor control, and of course, landing mechanics. And I'm sure that many of you have heard this before. There are various NFL football players who actually take ballet classes. Why? Well, because they learn how to become a better mover. They're not interested in performing, Swan Lake or something. They're just taking the classes to learn the skills so that they can become a better mover. And I would assume, just based off of that it reduces their likelihood of ACL injury as well. Don't get me wrong, contact ACL injuries are a different thing. Some guy grabs your leg and tries to tear your leg off while you're running, at max speed. Yeah, you're probably going to get injured. But just simply changing directions, maybe if we had better motor control and more range of motion that was available to us, that's under, control, maybe we would see a lower rate of injuries. So, I get it. You can have this argument over prevention versus reduction. I don't really care which term you prefer to use. It's a silly thing that we argue over that. The bigger question is, can we reduce the number of injuries? I don't care if you call it prevention or reduction. Can we do something to decrease the likelihood of this athlete being injured? And I would argue that looking at ballet, we could take some of those elements and reverse engineer them and teach them to our athletes.